Welcome to Three Tiny Questions. Three Tiny Questions with Sasha Martens, president and founder of Sasha the Mensch. That's his name and his job.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Three Tiny Questions, the podcast where we, three tiny partners, ask the leading minds in marketing one question each about brands, trends, culture, or whatever else comes into our silly little heads in an effort to make the world of advertising a tiny bit smarter. I'm Tom Chrisman, partner at Tiny, an ad agency devoted to making great work with great people and having a great time doing it. And with me, as always, are my partners, my Mikes, Michael Stupak and Mike Rovner. Say hello, Mike.
Hello.
Mike.
Oh, I'm Mike. You're Michael.
Shalom.
Today, we're thrilled to have somebody who many consider to be a household name in the business, specifically as a recruiter, career advisor, and overall nice guy. You might say, Mensch. Sasha Martens, aka Sasha the Mensch, which isn't just a nickname, it's also the title of his company, which is now 20 years old. You're 20 years in the business, Sasha. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mazel. With offices in New York and Buenos Aires, his multilingual team of recruiters partner with clients throughout the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Welcome to Three Tiny Questions, Sasha the Mensch Martens.
Nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We like to do it. We like to make it a big deal.
Yes.
There'll be music. It'll feel like
Get your own theme song.
Yeah.
Sort of.
That's good. I have my walkout, my walkout song. I like that. Yeah.
Here comes Sasha the Mensch, beefing up your agency bench. He's the nicest recruiter. Call him when you need a new suitor. He's Sasha the Mensch.
Before we get started with our first question, we usually just like to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself. How you got into this business. You could be quick, and what you're doing now. Like what got you into the game, and how did you evolve? And then take us right to today. You have 32 seconds. Go.
Great. I'll keep it short, but I previous to entering this industry in 2001, I was a music promoter and concert and event organizer in the Midwest, and worked from luminaries from David Allen Coe.
You never even call me by my name.
To Gil Scott-Heron.
The revolution will not be televised.
To every bad metal band in dying steel towns across the Midwest. And then in early 2000, I joined a company in Chicago and to learn how to recruit and had some great mentors there. And then in 2006, I hung out my own shingle here in New York. And ever since, I've been running my own shop and didn't anticipate to wind up working in Argentina. But as somebody that is deeply fearful of winter and snow, I like the idea of my religious faith of winter avoidance and spending January, February, and March there. And then wound up meeting some great people there and having them different people work for me over the years down there. And so that's a little bit the long of the short, so.
Wow. That was too short. So I'm going to give you a follow-up there. Like, how did you transition to the recruiting side?
When I was a music promoter, I was, outside of Chicago in a college town, and it's about building relationships with people. And I used to always say that in the music industry and the concert promoting industry specifically, disaster is the industry standard. You could have things of, whether your artist gets arrested on the way to the venue, or you could have somebody OD, or you could have a dispute with the owner. When I did do the outlaw biker hog roast, where there was one owner was no longer there, and you're like, who's paying for the venue? And so you always had to learn to be diplomatic, build relationships, and build trust. And particularly in the case of the outlaw biker hog roast in Rantoul, Illinois, I was very happy that we were able to find an immediate solution that made everyone happy, especially the artist and the biker gang as well too. So
editor, find a clip of the biker thing.
Outlaw biker hog roast.
Yeah, very important to keep your biker community happy. I always find.
Yes.
But
It's so
obviously extremely well suited to manage creatives. Where are they? Why aren't they here? Why have they overdosed in the hotel before the shoot?
We are going to kick this off officially. As you know, it's called Three Tiny Questions for a reason. Each one of us is going to ask you one question. And here's mine. You ready? It's time for question one. Let's get serious. Uh, I kid. So, in all seriousness, though, Sasha the Mensch, you see the industry's hiring patterns, I mean, more than anybody, right? I mean, you've been doing this a long time, and you're focused on this, right? Recruiting in our industry. So, what do you think is actually happening to creatives around, I don't know, a tender age of us, in their approaching their 50s, in their 50s, maybe already in their 60s,
Look
is
like
is
they're in their 40s.
that's right. And just beyond the age thing too, do you find that the story, even though the aging is happening to both sexes, is it a little bit different for women, than it is for men? Can you touch on that? The
yeah.
tender
I mean,
subject of ageism and sexism.
well, well, I'm glad for a soft question here to start with. What you'd see is I think that there is number one, I think there's definitely a commodification of the creative industry with consolidation of companies. In terms of ageism, it is always an issue, and I think it has been throughout. I couldn't say exactly if it hits men or women more. My suspicion is it probably impacts women more. Um, but what you tend to notice, and what I have sort of noticed, is that with the consolidation of companies, and let's say the biggest companies in our industry, that has squeezed the manager your senior managerial class a great deal, and so you see far fewer people, and there's far less invested in people that have a lot of experience. These companies are willing to make bets on people that may have less experience, um, and less training at certain points, and sometimes hope for the best. The better organizations, which I think are probably um, have a level of independence, you see a greater pyramid of leadership. I think, and that's the one thing I would sort of say today. I call it the Big Bang, is the merger of IPG and Omnicom is something that's been happening for across our industry for the last 10, 15 years. And I think it just became similar to a black hole. The things came closer and closer and closer, and finally you're seeing um, these two large organizations merge. But you saw that really at WPP, where we saw Thompson and Wonderman and VML and Weinar all merge again too. So you're seeing this consolidation of these companies, and what I think is now happening is you're starting to see a dissipation of, like, a broadening of people and opportunities for new companies to appear. That is something that is definitely out in the air, and you're starting to see that happen. And brands are more open and receptive to new companies and new business models than they were, say, even 10 to 15 years ago. You're seeing new organizations quickly being structured, and coming out of nowhere sometimes. And then other, let's just take probably one of the most successful companies, Tombras, in our business, which is a third generation family owned business, which has sort of rapidly expanded and has expanded into another country, into multiple countries now. But its footprint is still heavily Tennessee. And then you see, I take another company, it used to be called Sammy Road or Sammy Alliance. This now was bought by a private equity firm, but has also expanded rapidly. Another company called Dept, who I was not familiar with myself, a different business model. They have expanded rapidly. And if you said 10, 15 years ago, we'd still be talking specifically probably about a handful of the traditional agencies. And that's changed. I think on the positive is a lot of people do want people that have insights that are from more experienced.
We certainly love that optimistic point of view in terms of folks wanting and valuing the perspective of people with experience. That's why we started the agency you didn't mention, Tiny. But, and that's fine. But like when just to follow up on Mike's question, what are the sort of like the attitudes and emotions that you're encountering with, folks of that age who are, facing these, potential life-changing moments?
it's difficult. I mean, there's no way about it. There's multiple factors, beyond our, let's say, just the industry itself that are impacting us, from a both a global and political perspective. And I think these are larger things. And one thing that sort of feeds through is there's a sense of loss of control, where you're just seeing factors that are just much larger than anything that any one person or one organization can control. And I think that's, very stressful and at times very demoralizing as well too.
Mhm.
That's something that, I mean, it's been, you know, just speaking candidly, when people, that you'd say that, 10, 15 years ago or 5 years ago, I wouldn't be talking to people born and raised in this country who are debating seriously about relocating to a different location, a different country, which
Yeah.
these are the calculations that people never made before. And
Yeah. Yeah.
these are sort of realities that are new.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are
We're all
this.
going to show up in Buenos Aires in
Yes,
March, next
yes,
March,
yes.
if that's cool.
It's time for question two.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a question related to the topic we were just talking about, and something that I know you had a personal interest in speaking about. But in that we're seeing so much consolidation, not just in the advertising industry, but in the marketplace overall, where CPGs, telecoms, tech companies, financial service companies are merging. They're buying large divisions of other companies, or just buying those companies outright. That's going to mean a lot fewer competitive choices for the customer, and often leads to clients consolidating their agency relationships, leaving a lot of like really long-term anchor relationships that made agencies or whole, parts of agencies successful, and leaving them at the side of the road. And of course, like you said, we're seeing a lot of smaller agencies and options pop up in their place. What does this mean for our industry? But just as importantly, what does it mean for marketers?
Glad to touch on this is because one of the big changes, I think it's undeniable. You've seen that it's been the last 10 years in particular, you've just seen a shrinking of budgets. And I poked around a little, and it's something I thought about is, yes, they're sort of reflecting our bigger clients. I just, if you think in 2006, you had Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, Alltel, US Cellular, and now there's just three. So and if we all remember, those are massive, massive pieces of business. Even Alltel, massive piece of business, sustained agencies, and now you're down to three. That just reflects a shrinking of a shrinking of opportunities and shrinking of business. And you think about banking. In 2008, the top 10 banks were 45% of the marketplace, I think, and now the top five banks are 74% of the marketplace. That's just a lot, and you think about, and there's the big five, and then there's all the other mid-tier ones like the PNCs, and the others are probably under a lot of pressure trying to merge as well too. And that's a lot of business that's out that just not there.
Yeah.
You don't have
Yeah.
when you
Or it
when
gets so
there's
small that you can't, they get so small
yeah.
that they can't really hire an agency anymore.
I know another great one, which is an interesting one to follow a little bit, is the beer industry. If you remember InBev, when they merged, it was something like 60% of the entire market. And you're thinking that's Miller Lite and Budweiser being jammed together, plus a lot of the global pieces based out of Belgium. Um, InBev has had to adapt and change, and they've actually shrunk their market share. And you're seeing other places like the Modelo's and well, I think it was owned by Constellation, and Heineken, seeing opportunities to sort of push up and move up. And it's important to note that actually, this is where you do need sort of oversight. Um, that InBev, or years back, they tried to buy Modelo, and that was stopped by regulators because they said you couldn't buy that, and or they'd have to sell another brand off. Um, and that's, turned out to be beneficial for our industry that they did not allow that to go through.
Well, I guess, Sasha, what would be your message to marketers who, are most likely being pressured to, push the numbers down, right, and do more with less, especially as they're bringing, companies together, reducing redundancies, and, the push to like stay with one agency and get the most out of them because you're giving them so much. But at the same time, in trying to make the most out of something less, Not everything is necessarily available and perfect from the places that they are limiting themselves to. How do they, how do they deal with that sort of paradox of choice?
Well, one thing that's also been interesting, and I think we could probably even we're similar career spans here, is that, you know, 20 years ago, if you said I'm going to go work in-house, it'd be like, nice, no, good luck, see you later. It's off to, and what you have seen is a spreading of where people are willing to work and what they're willing to work and be able to bounce back and forth. Now, what you see with companies and brands is they're trying there's different formulas and they work with, sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And there's opportunities when these companies, depending on who's leading the marketing, whether it's the CEO or the, the CMO, depending who has the influence in what they're trying to accomplish, that they will give space and opportunity for brands and marketers to come in there. And the fact is, consistently, you still see in situations where there is really good brand or brand management, whether it's, and they can be challenger brands, whether it's you're selling Liquid Death, selling water, or Duolingo. These are products that are driven by excellent marketing, and
Yeah.
that's where they sort of stand out. Yes, there's also room for people where you can just do industry dominance, which probably you'll see from the tech companies where they can just flatten anything because they have a dominant hand. But there is room for the ones that are willing to invest and take the time and understand that building your brand has a lot of value, at
Yeah.
least in the United States, I'd say. So
I get the third question. Music.
It's time for question 3.
I came up when Sasha, we're all the same age. I came up with being good in the room and being sort of fun to hang out with was part of the deal in advertising. Like you had to be, the person that somebody would want to have a beer with, kind of. And it seems, and that cuts both ways in terms of like people that are different that are make it's hard to be, uh, but it was still like personality was kind of part of the deal. And it seems like the industry has become a bit more faceless and less personal. And there's, the humanness is gone. There's layoffs every week, literally. And the word mensch meaning human. Do you still think that being mensch is a good thing? Being a mensch is a good thing in an industry that's becoming robotic.
I always chose the name to be sort of make people laugh a little bit, but there is something in to try my best and to try the best at. You look at the long term and you try to advise people and give people insights of what it and to humanize and try to help people out in situations when you have the capacity to do so. And I think we're all still recovering from the pandemic, whether we want to, even 6 years on, and
Mhm.
the value of human interconnection. I will say the motivations of a lot of companies to bring everybody back to the office. There is something. There's a power dynamic there, but I really do think people really benefited from being together a lot. Doesn't mean you have to be every day, and I will acknowledge, in even my own experience with people who have worked with me, it's like some people work better at home, but there is something about a sense of community and belonging to something. Like how, frankly, how many, when you're isolated, you can get in your own head and you see the world from a very specific way. Where when you're with other people in the office, you're like, well, wait a minute, look, oh, I never thought of it that way. It's
And
yeah,
physically, I think is
yeah,
important. You're right. And
um,
unfortunately, what we're saying, we don't see this because we don't force anybody to do anything they don't want to do. We see each
yeah,
other whenever we
yes,
want
yeah,
to. But at these the larger companies where they're forcing people to at least come in 3 days a week is probably bare minimum. Is that only applies for those who can tell others what to do. The minute you're up above the food chain and you're the VP and up level, you know, I'm too busy for that. I don't have to. I'm managing all of you. I don't have to be in. And you're like, well, come on. So
Yeah, yeah.
there's the hypocrisy is real, and it's really disheartening to the rest of them. So it's like now you're right. You said power struggle. That's made me think of this. It's not about the fact that they don't want to be amongst each other. They're desperate to actually have human touch in every way. It's like, don't tell me what to do if you're not going to do it. And I think that lack of leadership has been pervasive.
2 points quickly is it was explained to me the leader of one company had a 9 a.m. Sunday or 8 a.m. meeting with his team on Sunday and berated the people, and it was just a question of power. It was just a question about power. And that's, because they could. And I do think much of this driving people back to the office is that you saw in the pandemic for the first time in a long time that labor started to have started to have more control. And I think fundamentally, large corporations don't like that. I'm not saying that it has to be it has to be all one sort of way, but I think that's for example, the conversations about AI, yes, will have an impact on the industry, but I also feel that one piece behind a lot of this conversation and the threat to what it's going to do is, hey, well, we can get the chat bot to replace you, and I think that's maybe I'm sure I'm a Luddite, and by next year I'll be some drone will have replaced me, but I do think that sort of sits behind that, and let's face it, there's industry, if you look at the industries we're in, what is it? The Fortune 500 has gone up something like 100% in the last since the pandemic, and the five biggest tech companies have gone up 1,000%. So there's this massive amount of money being poured into things, and there's a lot of hype around them. And sometimes I'd say, my NFT and blockchain investments haven't paid off, and I know Sam Altman-Fried is out there, selling a bridge where there is no river, but
Still trying to
some
get
of
rid of
these things,
I'm still trying to get rid of my Furbies.
yes, yes, yes.
Computer,
Yeah.
buy SashaTheDrone.com.
Yes,
All right.
yes, yes, yes.
All right, let's wrap it up, Michael.
In summary, I think that we all agree that being a mensch is still a great thing. So it's a delight.
That was the answer. That was the answer the whole time.
Right.
I mean, if you're not a mensch, I think all of your answers have come down to humans love humans, and we're going to get smaller, and we're going to be more local, and we're going to, and if you have problems getting a job, get more friends, reach out on LinkedIn, reach out to us.
The number one, if I just on a point of advice, the best thing you can do is become your own headhunter, and it's to reach out and just make contacts with people. And sometimes people have time, sometimes they don't. But that is the best thing you can potentially do, is try to ask people, talk with people, and have more conversations. Go into events. Sometimes it's there, sometimes it isn't. But I think that's the number one thing anyone can do in these situations.
Be present.
Don't look for a job. Look for a tribe. Look for people.
Look for your friends. Find your friends.
And you might not work with them right away, but it's a long career. Long.
Yeah.
I can tell
you're
you
lucky.
that.
All right. All right, you mentions. We got to wrap this up. This has been 3 Tiny Questions with Sasha Martens, a.k.a. Sasha the Mensch. A tremendous tiny thanks to him. Check him out at sashathemensch.com, spelling in the show notes. And you can check out an agency full of mensches at tinyadagency.com and all over your LinkedIn feeds. Tune in next time for more 3 Tiny Questions. Stay tiny, everyone.
Stay tiny.
That just was 3 tiny questions. Not 4 or 2 or 1 question, because why would we name a podcast 3 tiny questions if there are more or less than those 3? Wouldn't make much sense now, would it? Just like this song doesn't make much sense, but who cares? It's fun to sing. Stay tiny, everyone!